Have you ever wished that your spouse was more supportive of your stamping business? If so, this is the episode for you. I'm John Sanpetro, and on this episode of the Stamping is My Business podcast, how to get your spouse to support your business. It is one of the most difficult parts of being a stamping business owner for some women. Your spouse, usually your husband, doesn't support your business. And when your spouse doesn't support your business, it really can be difficult. It can be difficult to do the things that you need to do. It can be difficult to find even the motivation that you need in order to get through the more difficult times. I have seen this in so many different circumstances. I have seen this manifest itself as problems in so many different ways working with stamping business owners over the last 20-ish years. And one of the good things that I can say about it is that it usually is a fixable problem. And so I want to spend our time today talking about different ways, different steps that you can take to get your spouse to support your business. The first thing that you have to ask is why? Why doesn't your spouse support your business? Now, being very honest, if the answer is that this is just the state of your marriage, then, honestly, and I'm sorry for saying this, there's not a lot that you can do about this problem from a one-off perspective. And the reason for that is because, honestly, your stamping business isn't the problem. It's a much bigger issue. It's more of a marriage-wide issue. And just addressing the business part of it is really just handling the symptom, I guess is the best way to put it, rather than the actual problem. You're just putting a Band-Aid on something that's going to be temporary. And so I wish I could help those of you who say that, it's just the state of our marriage. I can't. I would really encourage you to speak with someone who can, to see someone who can. I'm a big believer in the power and effectiveness of counseling. And if you have those bigger issues in your marriage, then, you're probably having some difficulties that go well beyond your business as well. And it would certainly be a worthwhile investment to try to address those and try to fix them. Now, if this is not the case, if you don't think that the reason that your spouse doesn't support your business is just because that's the state of your marriage, then you have to dig. And you have to really be honest here, okay? It may not be fun, but you really have to be honest. You have to ask yourself, have you given your spouse a reason to not support your business? And I'll tell you that if you're being really honest with yourself, just based on my experience speaking with stamping business owners and speaking with their spouses, the odds are that you probably have. You've probably exhibited some irresponsible behavior. You've probably shown your spouse through your actions that you weren't taking the business part of it seriously, that you were treating it more like a hobby than a business. And I can't tell you how many times I've heard this. I used to do a live presentation called the Spouses Sit Down. And it was really interesting because what we would do is it would be attended by the stamping business owner and their spouse. And, 99 times out of 100, the spouse is the husband. And we would start the presentation where I would speak with both the business owner and the spouses together. And then I would ask the business owners to leave, and it would just be me and the husbands. And once they realized that I wasn't here to berate them or try to, convince them that they were terrible and wrong, once they realized that I really was here to listen and help, they really opened up. And I cannot tell you how many times I've heard spouses say some variation of, well, my wife says that she's running this as a business, but this is what she did most recently. And it's, something about spending an inordinate amount of money on stuff that you couldn't possibly have made enough profit on. Or in some cases, there have been times when stamping business owners have even hidden certain aspects of their business or their spending from their spouse. It really is bad when you do that. You got to understand your own culpability in that scenario, because if your actions are speaking louder than your words and your actions aren't good, that's not going to lend itself to getting spousal support. If you're hiding things from your spouse, then you're giving him a lot of good reasons to not support you. So, have you given him a reason? Be really honest about that. You also have to ask, does your spouse really understand the business model? There's a lot of skepticism around network marketing. And so he may think it's a scam. And you have to make sure that he really understands how you make money in this business. And then, quite honestly, is the business taking time from your time with him? In other words, is the business threatening to him? These are all questions you have to ask, and you have to answer very, very honestly. Now, if the answer to any of these questions is yes, then I have good news for you. You can fix it. You can absolutely do something about it. And so I want to give you a couple of steps that you can take to move in the right direction. First of all, acknowledge the issues. Don't try to sweep them under the rug. Acknowledge that there may have been mistakes made. There may have been something that you did or didn't do that would lend itself to your spouse not exactly supporting you. And then once you've acknowledged that, ask for a fresh start. You can't change the past. And you shouldn't ignore the past either. But if you can both agree that this day, today, is the new day one, that we're just starting fresh, we're wiping the slate clean, and we're going to make our decisions about whether or not you're going to support this business based on my actions from today going forward, it's going to be a lot easier to gain that trust and to move that process forward. But you have to be the one to acknowledge the issues, and you have to be the one to ask for that fresh start. And if you get it, if you get that fresh start, then you need to bring your spouse in to the planning. You need to make your spouse aware. Explain to your spouse exactly how you plan on making money in this business. Because most of the time, especially during that spouse's sit down, when I went through all of the different ways stamping business owners could make money, most of the spouses had no idea that that was possible. They were so excited when they found out all of the different ways that they could make money and how much they could make. But I have to say, I was surprised that no one had ever had that conversation. Specifically, their wives, the stamping business owners, had never had that conversation with them before. So make sure that you bring your spouse in on the planning. Explain how you plan on making money, and then share your exact goals. This is how much money I want to make doing this. This is how much money I want to make doing that. And this is how I plan on doing it. And ask for your spouse's input. When your spouse has input, your spouse has a vested interest. It's not just your plan, it's the couple's plan. And that is a good thing. Because even when you are the sole proprietor, so to speak, for the business, it doesn't matter. Your spouse is part of that business. I have been basically a sole proprietor, a single person, a one-person business for 2 decades. But I run my business out of my home just like you do. My wife and my son are both a big part of my business. And if I didn't have buy-in from them, it would be very difficult for me to run my business, much less be successful. So when you plan together, when you set goals together, it becomes both of your businesses. And not only do you get support, but you also get the room that you sometimes need to run that business. Having said that, though, the other thing that you need to do is you need to establish boundaries for your business. You can't let your business take up every single moment of your time at home. And this is where office hours come in. And office hours become really, really important. I can't stress enough how important office hours are. Okay? There has to be a time when you're working your business. But there also has to be a time when you're not working your business. There has to be a time when you're just your spouse's partner. And your spouse doesn't feel like, you're fighting, he has to fight for that time with you. And when you establish boundaries for one, you get boundaries for the other. Because when your spouse knows that there's time for him, then more often than not, he's also going to respect the time that you've set aside for the business. That's really important. And finally, the last step is to just be accountable. Okay? Be accountable. Let your spouse know how things are going. It's not like it's always going to be perfect. It's not. You're still going to make mistakes, no question about it. But be accountable. Own the mistakes. Celebrate the victories, but also own up to the setbacks. That's okay. That's okay. If you are able to develop a really good partnership with your spouse can be a really, really valuable asset. And I'll tell you honestly, you're going to be able to do things with your spouse's support that would be much more difficult to do if you didn't have it. So don't be afraid to be accountable. Don't be afraid to share your setbacks as much as you share your successes. The important thing is that you're being open and you're being honest and you're moving forward. And look, even after all this, don't be upset if there's still some skepticism. Don't be upset if things don't change overnight. Remember what I said earlier. Actions speak louder than words. And quite frankly, if your previous actions have gotten you to this point, it's probably going to take a little while to change things around. In the end, though, if you're true to your word and if you're consistent with your efforts, that support you've been craving will happen. And I'll tell you something else. If for no other reason than the fact that you're getting results, I'll tell you, nothing speaks louder than that. If you enjoyed this episode of the Stamping is My Business podcast, please feel free to like it, share it, subscribe to it, and listen to more. You can find us on iTunes, Google Play, our website, stampingismybusiness.com, and on our Facebook page, facebook.com/stampingismybusiness. If you have questions or ideas for future episodes, please email them to me at john@stampingismybusiness.com. This is John San Pietro, and I'm just trying to get you paid.